Hello and welcome to PropNext, the property podcast about all things related to the future of real estate. I'm delighted that you've joined me today. My name is Gavin Morgan, your host. If you'd like to know a little bit more about me, please check out www.propnext.com. That's propnx.com. Or drop me a line if you'd like to chat privately on gavinrmorgan@propnext.com. That's GAVINRMORGAN @propnext.com. Peter Rolston, welcome onto today's podcast. Just before you jump in with your dulcet tones, which I know you will be super keen to do, a quick introduction from me. So just to today's listeners, Peter and I have known one another for almost 15 years. Feels like a lot longer. Peter has held many roles in media and in public life, including having been a news anchor, I believe, Peter, in many different jurisdictions. And obviously been a huge amount of help to myself and others as a professional coach, certainly during my time with Hong Kong. Peter, welcome on the show.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Lovely to speak to you. Do people know actually where you are? Is that significant at this juncture?
Well, Peter, I hadn't actually unleashed the fact that we're now on to series 2 of the podcast, this being the first one from the UK and our delightful Northern Ireland. So no, I'm sitting here right now and loving being here.
Okay, so you've really returned to the scene of the crime because born, raised, educated, first job in Northern Ireland. What was it like? What was the Northern Ireland experience like for the young Gavin Morgan?
You know, I had a great time here. Much publicized troubles and, just a place that a lot of people wouldn't visit when I was a younger man. But great people, fantastic, just so many great things to do here. Tremendous education system. Of course, from time to time, it does spit out someone like me that discredits it, but just tremendous education system. And, what a lot of people talk about university life, I just had such a good time here, living at home, interestingly, but, fairly unrestricted and, able to do what I wanted to do. And really, I don't think I could have had it better. I've often thought of in my life whether I'd have had a much better experience anywhere else. And I really don't think that I could have.
So it's a bit unfortunate Kenneth Branagh got in with his movie first then.
Well, indeed. Well, there could have been a time when this was the prequel.
So listen, all going well, first job in Northern Ireland. Were you dreaming of, breaking loose? Were you dreaming of going abroad? What was it that made you take this radical step in early 2001? To leave and come to Asia?
Well, good question. And, really, I suppose I started working for a gentleman called Guy Hollis when I joined CBRE here, who'd had a big stint in the Orient. And, on our various different travels around and about the country here, we talked about it and my interest grew. And then as things like this happen, I suppose he ended up taking a role back out in Asia. And I shortly thereafter went and had a look around, flew out to Singapore and Hong Kong, and was fortunate enough to be offered a job in both places, and the rest is history.
Talking about history, you arrived in 2001. That was just before SARS, I suppose, wasn't it? So you had SARS, financial crises, COVID. When you arrived in Hong Kong, what was the state of the market? Was it sink or swim? You had to learn a lot to catch up, or were you, as you said, you'd received a very good grounding in your early career? Were you up for it?
Yeah, an interesting time back then too for Hong Kong. When I arrived, it was peaking a little bit. Not that I like to call markets down by when I turn up, but it had just really hit the peak of the .com boom back in 2000, 2001. And really pretty soon after I arrived, the market sort of hit the skids quite badly. And, it was a tough couple of years in terms of owners trying to fill space, sort of really limited capital markets activity. And then, of course, as you said quite rightly, then 2003, which is, I think, when Hong Kong had SARS, which was, I mean, who would have known, a dry run for the horrors that we've had with COVID over past years. But it was a slow start in Hong Kong around all of that stuff. But sort of once we got through SARS, it started to pick up, and it was it's been just an amazing experience, living in that great city.
Yeah, I mean, one doesn't want to be too ruminative, but and ask the obvious question, because it's a tough one. Because Hong Kong squeezes so much into such a short time. But I mean, if you had to put a finger on the biggest change that you saw in the sector over that time span of nigh on 20 years, what would it be?
That's a great question. The biggest change in the sector has really been the development of the new districts in Hong Kong. When I arrived, it was really tightly clustered around central Tsim Sha Tsui. A little bit of Hong Kong East, but certainly very much a back office location back then. And, just how the city has flourished and grown. I mean, you've got, a legitimate CBD now in Hong Kong East with one of the nicest clusters of commercial real estate in the city down there. A well-established Kowloon East, which is, probably become more of a, not back office, but certainly a secondary office location for people in Central. You've got West Kowloon and all of that infrastructure. I mean, what a place that's going to be in the future when the West Kowloon, the new development side, is built, and you've got that drive to the airport, the Macau Bridge, the high-speed train to Shenzhen. So, and Peter, as you said, a place that squeezes so much into such a short space of time, it happens at public sector level too. I mean, it's hard to imagine that in the 18 years that I spent out there, that the city could have morphed. Any other city could have morphed to that extent and create the platform that exists there today.
What about the feeling of the tone of the city, the sort of self-confidence, the swagger that Hong Kong had in the past? Have you noticed that sort of ebb away, and we've become more, China-focused or more inward-looking, or whatever the term is? Or Hong Kong has lost a bit of hunger?
I wouldn't say it's lost any of its hunger. I think one of the great things for me about Hong Kong has been the way it bounces back from almost anything. And of course, it's going through a little phase at the moment where there are a lot of people that are concerned. But I think it'll be back as strong, if not stronger than ever, once the issues related to COVID are past the city. I have no doubt about that. So hunger, no change there. I mean, I think the hunger will be as strong as ever. Social dynamic, I think, has changed quite a bit as the city is developing and changing and becoming, more part of China. Will it still be a great place for international business to be in the Asia-Pacific region? I truly believe that it will. I also think it probably remains the best spot to be for international business in the region. But you're seeing a lot changing on the social dynamic side of the city, and that'll make it feel different as it moves forward. Not necessarily bad, but certainly different.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about social dynamics in the city, and Hong Kong it's a prosperous place, but there is a marked divergence between the haves and have-nots. I mean, to what extent do you think that property has now become inaccessible for most people in Hong Kong to purchase? How do you feel about that, and the responsibility maybe developers have for easing that pain?
Yeah, so look, Peter, thanks for asking that. And as a property person, I've always felt that more could be done for people in need. I think in all big cities, but particularly in Hong Kong. If you look around the world today, there are a lot of big cities. Certainly they're on the face of it, when you drive around them, they look to be in strife around these issues, and that just doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't feel right. The new government coming in the beginning of July appear to have the bit between their teeth in terms of public sector housing provision. That there is a lot of developable brown land or brownfield land in Hong Kong. And, there's a huge opportunity to activate schemes that could really start to ease some of the challenges that exist around public sector housing. I do think that if you look at the model in places like the UK, where when private land is developed, there's a requirement, certainly for residential, for public sector housing to be components of large schemes. I'm not saying that is that specific model is what should happen in Hong Kong, but I do think that the public sector and private sector need to be together in that way on projects moving forward as well, to alleviate the challenges that Hong Kong's public sector, the public sector housing challenges a lot faster. So I think the government can do a lot quickly with available developable land. But it would be good to see other initiatives, particularly public-private sector partnership, to at least turbo boost what can be done directly by the government.
Yeah. You've always spoken out in favor of technology and the adoption of new technology and that sort of stuff. To what extent are there massive disruptors now coming into your sector? Things that fundamentally throw into question, I suppose, the existence of organizations like JLL, CBRE, and the rest.
Well, it's coming, and as you know, JLL is a big investor in tech, and it's now one of the 6 major revenue lines of the organization globally. But tech is, I think, particularly having leaned in and looked a lot more closely at tech in the last 5 years from a real estate perspective, particularly looking at its impact on the real estate services industry. There's no question it's going to fundamentally change all parts of the services industry. I just don't think that it's going to happen quite as quickly as a lot of people think that it will. Developing the technologies, technologies exist. I've had a lot of fun working on a number of projects around this, but developing the technologies to make sure that they do accurately and without error what needs to be done to replace, for example, real estate transactions, or not to replace, but to automate real estate transactions, to drive further automation into things like property management so that scale and efficiency are easier to achieve. That is, the technologies are being developed at the moment around that and many, many other areas, but fine-tuning and user and market adoption will take time. So, I think we'll gently continue to see over the next 10 years more and more tech starting to automate and replicate, driving speed and efficiency and scale into all parts of the service sector industry, but not in the finger snap that I think a lot of people got excited about. Whenever the industry really started talking about all this stuff, say around 5 years ago.
Yeah, we've touched on COVID. I don't want to do it to death here, but has that accelerated thinking in these sort of areas? Are we going to be able to face the existential questions about how people work from now on and how we live from now on, or is Hong Kong basically just going to go? We've paid for the real estate, we're going to go back and work in it.
I think it's a really interesting question. Hong Kong will be a little different to the rest of the world just because it is, because of the way it's built. Hong Kong is the only city in the world that is truly a vertical city. Almost everything that exists in the city, in real estate in the city, happens up through the building as opposed to sprawling or spread across the landscape. It's hard to find another city in the world where there isn't at least a mix of spread and sprawl and up through the building. So Hong Kong also lives very differently to the rest of the world as well. We talked about housing and shortages, and hugely unfortunately, that drives multiple layers of family into very small apartments together. So the driver to go back to the office, I think, is a lot higher in a city like that, and that is the case in Hong Kong. And it might be in, somewhere like Sydney, where most people are living in a fine piece of accommodation, in the suburbs, where they have, out in the suburbs, big garden, lovely view, et cetera, et cetera. So you can understand a reluctance to rush back to the office from an environment like that if you have a good work setup. But it's different in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong will lead the world back to the office for those reasons, in my view. And there have been a lot of little technologies that you've seen implemented over the last couple of years to help with that. I mean, the buildings that you work in, Peter, you don't have to touch lift buttons anywhere. Well, indeed, it seems like a vulgar concept now if you look back 3 years ago, but, no touch lift buttons, all of the automated cleaning that we see all around and about grade A real estate. And of course, even though some of them are quite basic, but automated technology to enable you to wash your hands or, social distance, etc. as well. So, yeah, Hong Kong definitely gets back first and is in full swing, I think, probably sometime later this year in terms of the office being right back to work. And we'll continue to see little technologies and being put in place to help make that happen.
So just to fold it back round again, and I'm not going to use the old cliche, if you met Gavin Morgan in 1998, what would you say to him? But, if you were advising young professionals in Northern Ireland, and there are many of them, well-educated, pretty positive youngsters, what would you say about the opportunities that Asia has for them?
Well, I think they're huge. And, Asia is, I don't know, particularly parts of Asia are some way through the equivalent of their industrial revolution. And it's interesting if you talk to a lot of people who have been around places like Hong Kong and certainly Hong Kong and China for a long period of time. I mean, they'll talk about it as mature or maturing and seasoned, but it's maturing and it's growing. But it's maybe midway. Even in Hong Kong, it's on a journey. It's definitely not at the destination yet. So I think how you want to educate yourself and prep to be successful in that market differs greatly from the 80s. I mean, I think particularly looking at it from an expatriate perspective, which of course I am, you could get off the plane in the 80s and, relatively easy to get a role. And if you applied yourself and you were a reasonably intelligent person, it was going to happen for you. I think you need language skills now. I think language skills are a prerequisite for success for sort of younger professionals in that market. I also think you need tech skills. I mean, coming to Asia, particularly as an expatriate, but I think anyone succeeding in Asia, particularly Hong Kong and China, tech and language skills will be more than an advantage. I mean, they're, I think, a part of a great long career in that region. But in terms of the market and how it's going to support a career, if you're an individual that wants to get ahead quickly and successfully, there's no better place in the world to do it.
You talked about journeys, you talked about destinations. Your continuing journey is now taking you to the US. What are your plans then for, Gavin Morgan 2.0?
Wow, if only it's this cold morning in Northern Ireland, Peter, it feels like Gavin Morgan about 6.0. But well, I'm going to, I've just had such a good time in the Asia Pacific region. And obviously I've worked in New York for a couple of years before. I worked in London too recently as well. So I think that experience will be enormously helpful to me as I decide on where I'll settle and what I'll settle with in the US. So, I think right now, I'm just looking, really just settling down here, but we'll make sure that I do something that leverages the connections base that I have and the experience that I've gained in management leadership and of course in transactions through, all that time that I've previously spent in New York, London and Hong Kong. So, let's see what's ahead. But I want to make sure that it's something that leverages all of what I've put together in my past.
You left Belfast out of that. New York, London, Hong Kong, Belfast.
Peter, my profound apologies. How could I? I just felt that as I'm sitting here at the moment, that it went without saying that it was a given.
Well, look, a final question for any Northern Irish people listening. Property picks. Where should we be buying in? The 6 counties.
Oh, I think it's Well, depending on how the protocol discussions turn out,
if they work, no, let's keep it brief.
Well, I mean, we will, but I tell you, the Peter, anywhere, if that all goes well. Because it still has, it's interesting. I spent a couple of days in a hotel here when I arrived before I moved into the little house that I've got. And I was blown away by the amount of golf tourism there. I was down on a hotel in the city centre and it was packed with people up here playing golf. And as we both know, it's not just a golf tourism place. I mean, it's a really pretty, beautiful place to come as a tourist.
Yeah.
So it has a lot to offer. And that'll have it. When people start coming back in their droves, it will have an impact. But I mean, Peter, Northern Ireland's one of those places, very, very set in the locations that, South Belfast, Hollywood from a residential point of view, city centre from a commercial point of view. And then, of course, there are lots and lots of opportunities in suburban towns all around Northern Ireland. But it's just, I think, almost more than anywhere else, it's just careful. Pick the right locations here. It is a society that is, very observant of what is where, to use a Northern Irelandism for you. So I think sticking with tried and tested locations. Obviously I've mentioned a few in and around Belfast, and investing there will stand, will stand its ground as a strategy for a long term to come in a market like this.
That's cool. Well, look, Gavin, that's about it. We wish you all the best from, this is an outside broadcast of your, podcast.
Well, thank you for flipping the mic on me, Peter. And I can't wait to see how it all works out. So, Peter Rolston, thank you very much for being on the show today.
It's a pleasure, Gavin. Thanks. See you soon.
So that's a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank you very much for tuning in to listen today and hope to welcome you back to hear some of our future shows. As I mentioned earlier, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about me, look at www.propnex.com, that's propnx.com, or drop me a line on gavinrmorgan@propnex.com. That's GAVINRMORGAN@propnex.com. I hope to hear from you soon, and thank you very much again for tuning in today. All the very best.